I was halfway through replacing a busted fence post in my backyard when I heard the voice that haunted every neighborhood potluck. "Excuse me, William," I sighed and turned. There she was, Clorinda Zimmerman, HOA president, clipboard clutched like a judge's gavel, and that condescending tone that made you want to accidentally spill motor oil on her shoes. "It's not even 9 in the morning, Clorinda," I said, brushing sawdust off my jeans. "You stalking fences now? This is your third violation for unapproved structural changes," she snapped, eyeing my fence like it had personally offended her. "Your HOA privileges are suspended, and per Article 12, Section 4, you are subject to removal." "Removal," I laughed. "For fixing my own property. You're in breach of bylaws. You've been warned. We've initiated eviction procedures. I own this house." She gave me a smug little nod and walked off, heels clacking down the sidewalk like a countdown to nonsense. I figured that was the end of it, Clorinda's usual empty threats. But 2 mornings later, I was yanking weeds in the front yard when a pair of unmarked black SUVs rolled up. Out stepped 4 guys in matching tactical vests, sunglasses, and earpieces. They looked like they were auditioning for a bad action movie. One of them barked, "Are you William Haskins?" "That's me." "Who are you?" "We're with Community Compliance Enforcement. You've been ordered off this property by the Homeowners Association. We're here to escort you out." I blinked. "You've got to be kidding." They didn't laugh. 2 of them started walking toward me, hands on their belts like they were ready to cuff me. "You know you're trespassing, right?" I asked, backing toward my porch. "This is private property." "You've got no authority here." "We've got orders," one said. "HOA directive. You're in violation. You've got 10 minutes to collect your belongings." I wasn't about to argue with guys who thought they were in a Tom Clancy novel, so I stepped inside and locked the door. Then I called the sheriff. While I waited, the rent-a-cops circled the house, knocking on windows, rattling the door handle, yelling about how they'd force compliance if necessary. I recorded every second of it on my phone. And then, thank God, I heard the crunch of gravel and saw the sheriff's cruiser pulling into my driveway. Sheriff Morales stepped out, hand resting on his holster. The man had been in this county longer than the pavement. He took one look at the fake cops and said, "Who the hell are you?" One of them stepped forward, flashing some generic badge. "Private enforcement, acting under HOA authority." Morales squinted. "This ain't a mall, this is a private residence. You got court orders?" "No, sir." "We were authorized by the HOA board." Morales raised an eyebrow. "So no legal documents, no court order, and you're threatening a homeowner on his own land." "It's a civil matter," the guy insisted. "No," Morales said, pulling out his cuffs. "What you're doing is criminal trespass, impersonating law enforcement and making threats." And just like that, the sheriff arrested all 4 of them, right there on my lawn. Clorinda came screeching down the street in her Lexus just in time to see her rent-a-cops getting loaded into the cruiser. She stormed up, red-faced and fuming. "This is a misunderstanding. They were executing HOA policy." Morales didn't even look at her. "You so much as step on this property without a court order, you'll be next." Clorinda turned a shade of red I didn't know existed. I gave her a wave and said, "Maybe next time try a complaint form instead of a SWAT team." She stormed back to her car like she was walking on hot coals. But I knew this wasn't over. Not with Clorinda. HOA story HOA stories Homeowners Association stories 3 days after the arrests, I found a certified letter taped to my mailbox, no postage, just taped there like some kind of ransom note. Inside was a single-page notice typed in bold, blocky letters. "The HOA board has voted unanimously to revoke your community membership status pending emergency review." No name. No signature. Not even a letterhead. I tossed it onto my kitchen table and called my lawyer, Maureen Klein. She'd retired from 30 years of property law and mostly helped vets like me deal with housing disputes. When I explained what happened, she didn't even pause. "They've crossed into illegal territory, William," she said. "I'll be filing an injunction by tomorrow morning." If they contact you again, document everything. By noon, I had 2 motion-activated cameras installed, one facing the street, one pointed at my porch. I wired them straight into a local hard drive. I wasn't giving Clorinda or her board any chance to claim miscommunication again. That night, I walked over to my neighbor's place. Gerald, retired Navy, built like a refrigerator and just as expressive. He'd lived on the block longer than anyone and knew every dirty trick the HOA had ever pulled. They tried this same garbage with the Hensleys 5 years ago, he said, nursing a black coffee on his porch. Tried to claim their garage was 2 inches over the setback line, filed complaints, fines, even threatened demolition. Hensleys couldn't take it, sold the house for a loss and left. I leaned against his railing. You ever see her push it this far before? Gerald exhaled through his nose. Not like this. Rent-a-cops, that's new, but Clorinda's been getting bolder ever since her nephew got on the board. Kid's fresh out of business school, thinks he's running a Fortune 500 company. The next morning, Maureen called again. They filed a lien against your property illegally. I'm requesting an emergency hearing. I'll meet you at the courthouse Thursday at 9 sharp. That afternoon, I received a hand-delivered envelope. This one had a logo, a gold eagle perched on a gavel. Inside was a glossy brochure titled Community Restoration Initiative. The HOA was launching a pilot program to reclaim properties falling short of neighborhood values. My address was listed as the inaugural example. I walked straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Morales met me in the back, flipping through the brochure. This is branding for a hostile takeover, he said. They're pushing something called adverse possession under the radar. Only way that flies is if you abandon the property or they prove you're in legal default. I'm not behind on anything, I said. Mortgage is paid, taxes clean, they're fabricating a narrative, Morales nodded. Already spoke to the DA, he's requesting a full investigation. I've got deputies pulling HOA financials, board minutes, and past filings. If they're laundering power through shell rules, we'll find it. That night, I didn't sleep much. I paced. I checked the cameras. Around 2 in the morning, motion alerts pinged my phone, 3 figures creeping up my driveway. One had a crowbar. I didn't go outside. I didn't yell. I just dialed Morales's direct line. 2 cruisers showed up in under 5 minutes. The would-be trespassers ran, but the deputies caught one, the youngest, maybe 20. He cracked the moment they put him in handcuffs. He said Clorinda promised him a board seat if he helped remove the problem, Morales told me later. They were trying to stage a break-in, make it look like you abandoned the place. 2 days later, the emergency court hearing was held in a packed courtroom. Clorinda sat at the HOA's table with her nephew, and a man who introduced himself as their compliance strategist. Maureen rolled her eyes so hard I thought she might dislocate something. When the judge entered, Maureen stood smooth as silk. Your Honor, we are seeking a full restraining order against the Oak Crest HOA and its representatives for coordinated harassment, illegal filing of property liens, and attempted unlawful eviction. Clorinda's strategist jumped up. These are baseless accusations. The HOA is within its rights to enforce community standards. The judge lifted a hand. I've reviewed the evidence. Sheriff Morales submitted a report detailing an attempted break-in linked to board members. Furthermore, the lien filed has no legal validity and was executed without judicial review. Clorinda stiffened. I'm placing a temporary injunction on all HOA enforcement actions against Mr. Haskins, the judge continued. Furthermore, I'm authorizing a forensic audit of HOA finances and board communications for the past 2 fiscal years. If the court finds evidence of conspiracy or misuse of funds, criminal charges will follow. Clorinda's nephew leaned over and whispered something. She didn't respond. Outside the courthouse, Maureen handed me a flash drive. Full copy of everything we have so far, but keep adding to it. The more we document, the stronger the case when this turns from civil to criminal. Later that afternoon, I walked my property line with tape and a surveyor just to shut down any future nonsense. The county registry confirmed everything was within code. That same evening, I noticed a few of my neighbors watching from their porches not judging. One of them, Mariana, a nurse who lived 2 doors down, waved me over. "I heard what they tried to do to you," she said. "Last month, they told me my driveway paint color violated aesthetic harmony. I repainted it twice before I realized they were just messing with me." "You still have the letters?" I asked. She nodded. "Every one of them. Would you be willing to speak to the DA if this goes further?" "Absolutely." By the end of the week, I had statements from 6 other homeowners. Each one documented an incident: manipulated fines, sudden anonymous complaints, threats of revoked amenities, and in one case, a forged signature on an agreement to install a community surveillance system. The district attorney's office called me the next day. "We're opening a formal investigation. If the HOA is using intimidation tactics to seize property or inflate dues for personal gain, that's racketeering." Clorinda must have felt the walls closing in. That weekend, she hosted a town unity meeting in the community center. I went. So did half the neighborhood. She stood at the front, flanked by her nephew and 3 board members. Her smile was brittle. "There have been misunderstandings," she began. "We want to reassure everyone that the HOA is committed to transparency and fairness." Gerald raised a hand. "So why'd you send people to break into William's house?" Clorinda's smile faltered. "That was an unsanctioned act by overzealous volunteers." Maureen, sitting quietly in the back, stood and held up a printed screenshot of a text. This message shows Clorinda authorizing the break-in attempt. It was recovered from the arrested individual's phone. The room went very, very quiet. Mariana stood up. "You threatened to tow my car for being parked in my own driveway." Another voice from the back. "You fined me for planting tomatoes." Clorinda backed up a step. The DA's investigator entered from a side door and addressed the room. "We'll be interviewing any resident who's had contact with the board. If you've been fined, threatened, or had property altered without consent, we want your statement." Clorinda tried to leave, but a deputy blocked the exit. Her nephew sank into his chair. It didn't take long after that. Subpoenas went out. Bank accounts were frozen. A special election was scheduled. Clorinda resigned 2 days before the vote, and me? I finally fixed the rest of my fence. No clipboard, no threats. Just the sound of hammer on wood, and the neighbors dropping by with lemonade and stories of their own. Turns out, all it took to bring down the HOA's little empire was a sheriff who did his job, a lawyer who knew the law better than they did, and a neighborhood tired of being pushed around. The week after Clorinda's resignation was like watching a dam crack. Nobody trusted the interim board, Clorinda's handpicked leftovers, but the neighborhood was too used to keeping their heads down, until the audit findings came in. I was outside resealing my porch railing when Maureen pulled up in her rust-colored sedan and waved me over. She didn't get out. She just leaned across the passenger seat and held up a single page, her silver bracelet clinking against the car door. "Got the preliminary audit report," she said. "You're going to want to see this." I slid into the seat and scanned the page. My jaw tightened as I read. "They embezzled over $120,000. I asked, voice low. Maureen nodded. "They funneled dues into a dummy landscaping company registered under the treasurer's cousin. Claimed it was for beautification projects. Half the receipts were for non-existent work. The rest went straight into private accounts." I looked over at her. "How long has this been going on?" 6 years, at least. Started small extra charges for mulch, inflated contractor fees. Clorinda scaled it up after she became president. "You were just the first one to push back hard enough to shake loose the foundation." I sat back, stunned. "What happens now?" "The DA's office is filing fraud charges." "That includes wire fraud, misappropriation of HOA funds, and conspiracy to defraud homeowners. They'll issue warrants soon." That night, I didn't just lock my doors, I double-checked every corner of my property. If they'd been bold enough to send people to threaten me before, getting cornered might make them desperate. 2 nights later, Mariana's security camera picked up movement near her backyard gate. Someone had tried to cut power to her floodlights. She brought me the footage and we watched it frame by frame. The man wore all black, but the camera caught his face as he glanced up at the motion sensor. It was the former board treasurer. I sent the footage straight to Morales. By morning, a warrant was out. Deputies picked him up at a rental storage unit on the edge of town. Inside, they found HOA documents, cash-stuffed envelopes, and a burner phone with dozens of messages between him, Clorinda, and her nephew. Some of them described contingency plans and how to handle non-compliant residents. The DA held a press conference that afternoon. I watched from the edge of the crowd, arms folded. This investigation has revealed a pattern of racketeering and organized financial abuse committed by individuals entrusted with managing community resources, the DA announced. We have issued criminal indictments for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted coercion. Clorinda was arrested at a private golf club 3 counties over. Her nephew fled the state but was picked up 2 days later in Colorado, trying to cross into a new identity with expired plates and a glove box full of shredded documents. The whole thing made the local news, then the regional, then a syndicated segment on suburban corruption. But while the headlines swirled, we still had to live here. The interim board, now under full investigation, tried to delay the election. Gerald wasn't having it. He walked right into the community center during one of their closed administrative sessions, banged his cane on the table once, and said, "You've got 24 hours to announce a date or we'll hold a vote without you." Nobody challenged him. The election was set for 2 weeks out. I didn't intend to run. I'd had enough of HOA politics to last a lifetime, but that didn't stop people from asking. First Mariana, then Gerald, then a pair of young parents I barely knew who lived by the retention pond. "You're the only one who stood up when it counted," the dad said, holding his toddler on one hip. "We trust you." I thought about it for a long time, then I told them the truth. I'll help fix this, but I don't want a title. I want a system that can't be hijacked again. So I drafted a new charter. Maureen helped with the legalese, and Morales reviewed it to make sure it aligned with state statutes. It cut board power by 2/3, required public access to all meeting minutes, and created a rotating oversight panel of non-affiliated residents. We called it the Homeowner Accountability Act. It passed unanimously at the first meeting after the election. The new board included Mariana, Gerald, and a software engineer named Aisha who had spent the last year quietly building a database of every complaint, violation, and fine issued by the previous regime. Most of them were fake, she said during the first board session. They used a template and just changed the names. She'd already compiled a refund schedule and a list of residents eligible for compensation. It was over 40 people. But the real surprise came when Gerald brought in a dusty cardboard box he'd kept in his garage since the early days of the HOA. Inside were the original founding documents bylaws written by the first homeowners before Clorinda's clique rewrote everything. They were simple. Transparent, fair, looks like we've had the right rules all along, he said. Just had the wrong people enforcing them. We voted to restore the original charter with the new accountability clauses added in. The legal filings took 2 more weeks, but once it was done, the HOA no longer resembled the authoritarian mess it had become. It was a neighborhood again. The following weekend, we held a block party not under HOA orders, not with permits or forms, just people bringing folding chairs, grilling hot dogs, and letting kids ride scooters without measuring the decibel level. I was sitting near the curb when Morales stopped by, not in uniform, just jeans and a ball cap. "Looks like you scared the termites out of the walls," he said, accepting a lemonade from one of the kids. "I didn't do it alone," I told him. He nodded. "Still, not many folks would have stood their ground the way you did," Took guts. I looked around. Mariana was laughing with Aisha near the grill. Gerald was teaching a kid how to carve a slingshot out of a tree branch. No clipboards, no threats, just neighbors. Yeah, I said. But now we've got something better than guts. What's that? A community that remembers how to push back. He raised his glass. To keeping the peace without needing a badge. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops, I realized something. They tried to take my home, my voice, and my rights. But in doing so, they'd handed me and everyone else here something stronger, not just justice. Ownership of our homes, of our rules, of our future, and we weren't giving that up again. The first hearing in the criminal case against the former HOA board took place in late spring, and by then, the neighborhood looked different. Lawns were a little more relaxed. Children's chalk drawings stretched across sidewalks without fear of fines, and nobody flinched when a doorbell rang. But beneath the calm was a current of anticipation. We all knew the fallout wasn't over. I arrived at the courthouse early. The courtroom doors hadn't even opened yet, but already, news vans lined the street like vultures waiting for a story to die. A reporter tried to flag me down, but I kept walking. I wasn't here to give sound bites. Inside, I found a seat behind the prosecution's table. Mariana came in a few minutes later, carrying a file box full of witness statements and financial records. She gave a brief nod, then sat beside Aisha, who had compiled a full timeline of every forged violation and manipulated vote the HOA had forced through the previous 2 years. The bailiff called everyone to rise as Judge Eddington entered stern, gray-eyed, and famously intolerant of procedural games. He glanced briefly at the defense table, where Clorinda sat in a navy blazer, visibly thinner, her mouth tight as thread. Her nephew sat beside her, not looking up from the table. The former treasurer was missing, remanded to custody after attempting to contact witnesses via an intermediary. The prosecution opened with a clear statement. This case is not about community standards. It is about abuse of power, financial fraud, and deliberate attempts to destabilize homeownership through coercion. Clorinda's defense attorney, a polished man with an overworked tie knot, objected to the tone. Judge Eddington dismissed it without looking up from his notes. Then the evidence began. They brought up the financials, first Aisha's compiled spreadsheet, verified by 2 independent auditors and the DA's forensic accountant. Every dollar unaccounted for was cross-referenced with contractor invoices that had never existed. The dummy landscaping company. Registered to the treasurer's sister-in-law who had no business license and had never owned a lawnmower. Then came the tampered vote tallies. Mariana took the stand and described how identical handwriting appeared on 30 separate proxy ballots during the last board election. She compared them against a handwriting sample from Clorinda's nephew. The match was near perfect. "You're saying they manipulated their own election?" the defense asked. "I'm saying they fabricated a democratic process to legitimize their control," Mariana replied. "They didn't win. They stole." The room was dead silent. Next was Gerald, who brought out a spiral notebook from his workshop, his own records of community meetings, complete with voice memos and time-stamped annotations. He played a clip of a board session where Clorinda could be heard instructing committee heads to pressure the holdouts by increasing their violation notices. The judge paused the audio. "To clarify," he said slowly, "this is a recorded admission of targeting residents for resistance." "Yes, Your Honor," Gerald said. "She said it 3 times. I got all 3. When Clorinda took the stand, she looked toward the jury but never directly at the crowd. Her voice was tight, rehearsed. "We were protecting property values, that's all. The community needed order." The prosecutor didn't blink. "Is that why you authorized unauthorized individuals to enter a resident's home in the middle of the night without notice or legal grounds?" "I never gave that order. We have a signed memo recovered from your email, dated 3 days before the incident. It uses the phrase 'remove him before he gets traction.' Can you explain that?" she faltered. "That was figurative. I meant remove the problem, not the person. The prosecutor held up Mariana's security footage. This man was caught disabling a neighbor's security system. He testified he acted under your promise of board control. Are you saying he misunderstood your figurative language? Clorinda's mouth opened, then closed again. She looked toward her nephew, who refused to meet her gaze. The trial lasted 4 more days. When it finally ended, the jury deliberated for 6 hours. They returned with 41 guilty verdicts across the 3 defendants: fraud, conspiracy, unlawful entry, misuse of community funds, and attempted coercion. Judge Eddington sentenced Clorinda and her nephew to 5 years apiece, plus restitution. The treasurer received 7, with an added charge for witness tampering. The judge also ordered the dissolution of all shell companies tied to the HOA, and an independent trustee was appointed to oversee the return of misused funds to homeowners. The restitution checks began arriving 6 weeks later. Mine came with a handwritten apology from the court trustee, not for the money, but for the system failing to catch it sooner. But the biggest change wasn't the money. It was what happened after. The new board, now fully elected with open ballots, voted unanimously to eliminate bulk enforcement authority. All rule changes required 2/3 homeowner approval. All financial decisions were publicly disclosed. The HOA was still there, but it no longer ruled like a shadow government. One morning, I found a small envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a photo. It showed my house, my fence, my porch, everything taken right after the court ruling. On the back, someone had written in careful print, "This is what winning looks like." There was no name, just the image. That weekend, instead of a formal meeting, the board hosted a transparency potluck at the community park. No speeches, no motions, just neighbors bringing food and stories and watching their kids climb the old jungle gym. I brought a tray of ribs and set it down next to Mariana's chili. Gerald was already there, teaching a couple of teenagers how to sharpen garden tools the right way. Aisha stood nearby, talking with a group of young families about creating a digital portal to report issues without involving the board unless necessary. "We don't need to be the enforcers," she said. "We need to be the support system." I walked over and nodded. "Exactly how it should have been from the start." She turned. "You planning to disappear now, or are we going to see you at the next review session?" I thought for a second. "I'll be there, quietly in the back." "But I'll be watching." "Good," she said. "We need that." The music played late into the evening. Someone had brought a speaker, and the kids danced in a haphazard line across the grass. No one complained. No one measured the decibels. The sun dipped low, painting the rooftops in gold, and for the first time in a long while, the neighborhood felt like a place where people lived, not where they were managed. Nobody here forgot what had happened. But they'd learned something more important. The power to reclaim what had been taken wasn't locked in courtrooms or charters. It was in each of us, standing up when it counted. Together.